December 20th, 1989, 12:45 a.m. When 27,000 American troops invaded Panama with weapons the world had never seen in combat, every word spoken by Panamanian soldiers was intercepted on radio transmissions and recorded in real time. Within 6 hours, 3,000 Panamanian Defense Forces collapsed completely, and the words they spoke during those final moments revealed something shocking about human nature when facing impossible odds. What did they actually say when they realized they were fighting an enemy they couldn't even see? Panama City, Panama. The night sky suddenly exploded with light. Sergeant Luis Cordoba, a 28-year-old soldier in the Panama Defense Forces, grabbed his radio as the building shook around him. In the next few minutes, you will hear the real words that Panamanian soldiers spoke when they first fought Americans. These words were recorded on radios, captured in combat footage, and later shared in secret interviews. What they said will surprise you. This is exactly what the title promised: the real voices from that night when 27,000 American troops came down on Panama. Cordoba pressed the radio button. His voice cracked as he spoke in Spanish. "What the hell is happening?" He was stationed at the Comandancia, the main military headquarters in downtown Panama City. Strange aircraft roared overhead, but he could not see them in the darkness. Tracer bullets lit up the sky like deadly fireworks. These were F-117 Nighthawk stealth bombers, striking for the first time ever in combat. Cordoba and 3,000 Panamanian soldiers now faced 27,000 U.S. troops with weapons they had never seen before. Just 3 days earlier, Panamanian commanders told their soldiers not to worry. General Manuel Noriega himself had said the Americans would not risk fighting in Panama's streets. The Panamanian forces trained for guerrilla warfare in the city. They believed their knowledge of the local streets and buildings would protect them. Intelligence reports predicted maybe some limited airstrikes. Nothing like this. Not a full invasion. Colonel Roberto Diaz Herrera had told troops on December 17th that the American threats were just talk. "They've been threatening for months," he said. "They won't act." Panama had 4,100 combat-ready troops. The commanders thought this was enough to make the Americans stay away. Cordoba was not a general or a famous hero. He was just a regular soldier who happened to be working the radio that night. But his voice, recorded on intercepted transmissions, became the real-time story of how quickly everything fell apart. At 12:46 a.m., just 1 minute after the attack started, he transmitted his first report. "Comandancia reports explosions everywhere. We cannot identify the aircraft." His hand shook as he wrote down incoming messages from other bases. Every radio channel screamed with panic and confusion. Then, at 12:47 a.m., Cordoba's voice changed. He saw something that made his blood run cold. Giant aircraft circled overhead, shooting down at buildings with perfect accuracy despite the complete darkness. "These are not exercises," he radioed to other units. "They are using weapons we have never seen." He paused, trying to understand what was happening. Then he said the words that changed everything. "We cannot see them, but they can see us." For years, soldiers believed that darkness protected defenders. That night, Cordoba realized the old rules no longer applied. The Americans had technology that turned night into day, and the Panamanians had nothing that could stop it. At 12:52 a.m., just 7 minutes after the attack began, Cordoba received new orders through his radio. "Form defensive positions. Prepare for urban combat." The Comandancia sent 82 soldiers to defend the headquarters building. They carried AK-47 rifles, RPG-7 rocket launchers, and large 50-caliber machine guns. These were the best weapons Panama had. But what they faced was something from a different world. Apache helicopters flew overhead with special cameras that could see heat from human bodies. Sheridan tanks rolled through the streets with thick armor. Delta Force soldiers wore night vision goggles that made the darkness look like daytime. The Panamanians might as well have been fighting with sticks and stones. At 1:15 a.m., the battle at Fort Amador started. A Panamanian radio operator transmitted in panic. They are everywhere! How do they know where we are? Lieutenant Marco Justines tried to keep his 24 soldiers calm at the Battalion 2000 barracks. He radioed orders to his men. "Hold your positions. They cannot see in the dark." 3 minutes later, his radio crackled again. This time, his voice shook. "Lieutenant, they can see. They are hitting our exact positions." The Americans were not guessing where to shoot. They were watching the Panamanians through advanced technology, picking them off one by one. The battle at Tocumen Airport showed just how big the gap was between the two sides. The Panamanians used Soviet equipment from the 1970s. The Americans used technology from the future. Captain Ivan Castillo transmitted at 1:45 a.m., his voice desperate. "Requesting orders. Our anti-aircraft fire is hitting nothing." The Panamanian guns could only shoot up to 4,900 feet effectively. But the American AC-130 gunships circled at 14,500 feet, far above the reach of Panamanian weapons. The Americans could hit the Panamanians, but the Panamanians could not hit back. At 2:30 a.m., Cordoba heard something on the radio that made his stomach drop. A Panamanian major transmitted from the Comandancia. "We are not fighting soldiers. We are fighting machines." This was the moment when the Panamanian leadership understood the truth. They could not win this fight. It did not matter how brave they were. Years later, Cordoba remembered that exact moment in an interview. "When I heard that, I knew we had already lost. It was not about courage anymore." By 3 a.m., only 2 hours and 15 minutes after the invasion started, the Americans had destroyed 13 of the 16 Panamanian command centers. The Comandancia fell after a battle that lasted 4.5 hours. 50 Panamanians died there. Only 4 Americans died. At 4:45 a.m., a Panamanian commander transmitted his final order. "I order a general retreat. Save your lives." In the pre-dawn darkness at 5 a.m., Panamanian soldiers began taking off their uniforms and throwing away their weapons. They wanted to blend in with regular people and go home. Dozens of radios that had been screaming with voices all night suddenly went silent. Cordoba intercepted one last transmission that told the whole story. "I am going home. This is not a war. This is a massacre." The Panamanian forces had no way to encrypt their radio messages. The Americans heard every single word they said. They knew exactly where the Panamanians were, what they planned to do, and how scared they felt. The Panamanians were fighting blind. The Americans saw everything. The numbers tell the story better than any words could. When the attack began at 12:45 a.m., the Panamanian Defense Forces controlled all 16 of their military bases across the country. 6 hours later, they controlled 0. 23 American soldiers died in the fighting. 314 Panamanian soldiers died. At Fort Amador alone, 51 Panamanian officers walked out with their hands up by 7 in the morning. The American military had planned for this operation to take 3 to 7 days. The real fighting was over in 6 hours. By December 21st, just 24 hours after the invasion started, more than 1,200 Panamanian soldiers had deserted. They simply walked away from their bases and went home. Documents captured later showed that Battalion 2000 had 600 soldiers when the invasion began. By dawn, only 47 remained. The Dignity Battalions were Noriega's special paramilitary forces. They started with 3,000 members. By December 22nd, fewer than 200 were still fighting. Some Panamanian units tried to switch tactics. In the El Chorrillo neighborhood, snipers hid in buildings and took shots at American soldiers. Captain Ricardo Arias transmitted orders at 8 in the morning on December 20th. Switch to urban guerrilla tactics. But this plan backfired terribly. The American response was massive and brutal. A C-130 gunship circled overhead and fired at any building where shots came from. Entire blocks caught fire from tracer rounds. 4,000 civilians lost their homes in the El Chorrillo fire. The Americans were not taking chances with snipers. The soldiers who lived through that night never forgot what they saw and heard. Corporal Miguel Hernandez was captured and interviewed years later in 1993. He said, "When I saw the helicopters, I thought, we can shoot those down. When I saw they could see us through walls with their equipment, I thought, how do we fight ghosts? When my sergeant was hit by a bullet from somewhere we could not even see, I thought, I want to live. So I put down my rifle." Sergeant Cordoba, who had been on the radio all night, made a decision at 3 a.m. that probably saved lives. He transmitted a message to anyone still listening. They have won. Survival is not cowardice. He does not know how many people heard him, but 14 men in his building walked out with white flags in the next hour. The Americans gave them water and bandages. Cordoba said later, "That's when I really understood. This was not about conquering us. They just wanted Noriega." Lieutenant Justines, who commanded troops at Battalion 2000, explained his choice. "I told my men to fight for Panama, but when I saw the technology, helicopters that fly silent, bombs that guide themselves, soldiers who see in complete darkness, I realized we were not fighting for Panama. We were dying for one man who had already run away. I ordered my men to surrender at 5:30 a.m. 14 of them survived because of that order." Inside the Comandancia, between 12:45 and 5:15 in the morning, the battle was like nothing the Panamanians had ever experienced. The sound was not normal gunfire. It was the deep brrrt of a C-130 40mm cannons firing 100 rounds every minute, shredding concrete walls like paper. Red tracer rounds created curtains of fire in the darkness. Entire walls of the headquarters building collapsed, floor by floor. The air smelled like gunpowder, burning wood, and diesel fuel from destroyed vehicles. The temperature was 82 degrees with 90% humidity. Panamanian soldiers in full combat gear sweated and panicked as their radios crackled with desperate voices speaking Spanish. 2 weeks after the invasion, on January 3, 1990, Manuel Noriega finally gave up. He had been hiding in the Vatican Embassy in Panama City. American soldiers played loud rock music outside the building day and night until he could not take it anymore. He walked out and surrendered. By January 12th, the Panamanian Defense Forces no longer existed. The new government created the Panamanian Public Forces instead. This was not a military that could attack other countries. It was just a police force to keep Panama safe. Former soldiers had a choice. They could join the new police force or take money and leave military life forever. 1,200 former Panamanian soldiers became police officers. 2,300 took the money and went home. Operation Just Cause changed how America fights wars. The technology used in Panama, like stealth bombers, GPS-guided bombs, and night vision equipment, became standard in the Gulf War just 2 years later in 1991. American military academies now study the 6-hour collapse as proof that overwhelming technology can replace long wars. But Panamanian military schools study it too, teaching the opposite lesson. You cannot fight a conventional war when the enemy has technology you cannot match. Sergeant Luis Cordoba, whose voice we heard on the radio that terrible night, was released from American custody on January 15, 1990. He joined the new Panamanian Public Forces as a civilian police officer. In a 2005 interview, he said, "I do not regret surrendering. I regret that we were put in a position where we had to fight a war we could not win, for a dictator we did not choose." He retired in 2012 and worked as a security consultant, teaching Panamanian businesses about crisis management. The American government released his intercepted radio transmissions to the public in 2014. They are now stored in the U.S. National Archives, a permanent record of that night. Panama never gave military honors to the soldiers who fought that night. The new government wanted to forget the Noriega era completely. Córdoba never received recognition for his radio calls that encouraged surrender and probably saved lives. The American military gave out 6,193 medals for Operation Just Cause. Not one went to a Panamanian. In Panama today, December 20th is called the Day of National Mourning. But people do not mourn for the soldiers. They mourn for the 300 to 500 civilians who died. The lessons from that night go beyond just military strategy. Innovation is not just about having better weapons. It is about using all your tools together as one system. The Panamanians had some modern equipment, but they did not know how to combine everything effectively. Adaptability matters too. Panamanian soldiers who surrendered early survived at a 95% rate. Those who kept fighting as guerrillas had a 40% casualty rate. Adapting to reality is not cowardice, it is intelligence. What did Panamanian soldiers say when they first fought Americans? They said what soldiers throughout history have said when facing impossible odds. They expressed shock, disbelief, fear, and ultimately made a choice between dying for a cause they did not believe in or living with honor. Sergeant Córdoba's words at 3:47 that morning sum it up perfectly. We are not cowards for wanting to live. We are smart. History remembers Operation Just Cause as a military success. But the words of those Panamanian soldiers remind us that every successful operation is someone else's trauma and forced choice. The lesson is not about American strength or Panamanian weakness. It is about what happens when ordinary people following orders face technology they cannot understand in a fight they cannot win. What they said was not unique to Panama. It is what any of us might say when facing the inevitable.